I've learned about myself for the past like 10, 15 years is that anger and frustration and seeking justice is something that drives me,
Mm.
like it motivates me through anything, And when I saw firsthand how people were dealing with the Flint water crisis, I just got angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. Um, and I kind of had this, like idea that I'll do like a very, very Werner Herzog sort of independent um, feature there if I got the money. Something that was like almost borderline experimental.
Mm.
Um, and it just kept on snowballing into 8 years of shooting and editing and finally it came out last month in November.
They knew there was a problem. And instead, they released data that suggested that there was no problem whatsoever.
It's hijacking, where people have elected their officials locally, and then their power is completely taken away.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another one of our convos. Today, joining us is another very special guest, filmmaker, director, William Hart. Thank you for joining us and taking the time out to talk with.
Thanks, man. I'm really happy to be here.
All right. So we're here because you released a new documentary, Lead and Copper, about obviously some very, critical social topics, particularly like the water infrastructure in Flint and everything that's been happening in America. And we're definitely going to be kind of like having a conversation about that because I thought it was like a very interesting watch and documentary and like a topic that I don't think necessarily gets covered enough considering like the severity of it. Would you kind of like agree to that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people in this country take for granted, first of all, infrastructure, but in our documentary, water and water quality, and then also how much we use water on our day-to-day basis beyond just drinking. And we wanted to, with the documentary, explore how there can be a series of dominoes that can be pushed over that can lead to disastrous health effects
Yeah.
for a population.
Yeah. And definitely gonna dive a little bit more into that. But before we kind of go full into that, like I also want to kind of give a background about you and like for our listeners and watchers who may not be familiar with you, like kind of how did you get your start in film and like kind of what kind of pushed you down this path of like getting into filmmaking?
So when I knew when I was like 8 years old that I wanted to be a director, honestly, like I saw Star Wars and thought like I'm gonna do that,
Okay.
and I never really, I'm really stubborn, so I never really like strayed from that path. Um, Went to film school at School of Visual Arts, and like did some other programs at other schools through my adolescence up and when I graduated, I couldn't get a job in film, or I couldn't get the jobs that I wanted. I really wanted to do just commercials. Like I really just wanted to do like high end like perfume commercials
Yeah.
that like beautiful, and I still kind of want to do that. But I had this, I don't know, like affinity or um, interest in doing journalism too. My parents worked in journalism, and my
Okay.
dad worked at Associated Press, and um, he was a photojournalist in the '80s, and I got this job um, at Yahoo News almost like a few months after graduating because they were like, "Do you know how to edit?" And I'd been
Mm.
editing forever. I grew up teaching myself how to edit on Premiere and Final Cut. And so by the time I was, 21 or 22, I already had enough experience, and they gave, they're like, cool, you can shoot, you can edit, like, great. Like, come on down. And I was a freelance for them for a while, do a lot of like small news stories, And eventually it grew into working with Katie Couric's team a few times,
Okay.
and then being the guy that they would send to, uh, you know, current event, like immediately. For Flint specifically, they called me the day they put me on the flight, and in January of 2016, um, and I was there for like a week and a half. With I didn't have a producer for the first few days, um, and that's kind of how the I got interested in the project. And I
Hmm.
never really wanted to do documentaries. After film school, I was shooting a few. My friends would hire me, or people would hire me to like go down to Haiti and shoot a documentary. But I never really wanted to spend as much time with a subject and really invest myself in it. But one thing that I've learned about myself for the past like 10, 15 years is that anger and frustration and seeking justice is something that drives me,
Hmm.
like it motivates me through anything, And when I saw firsthand how people were dealing with the Flint water crisis, I just got angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. Um, and I kind of had this, like idea that I'll do like a very, very Werner Herzog sort of independent um, feature there if I got the money. Something that was like almost borderline experimental.
Hmm.
Um, and it just kept on snowballing into 8 years of shooting and editing, finally it came out last month in November.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned like Star Wars. I think that's like if you ask a lot of people what you got into film, especially like since it came out, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of them. It's like, yeah, I saw
Yeah.
Star Wars, and it's like that was the one that like really opened my mind to the possibility of like film and stuff like that. It's just like always funny to see like that's always
I
kind of
mean,
like a starting point for a lot of people.
how can it not be? It's about like a rebel who goes up and fights like the evil empire. And,
Yeah.
growing up listening to like Rage Against the Machine and and like Black Flag, and just like being an angsty teenager, seeing that probably when I was like 5 or 6, and then listening to punk and rock music and rap music in my teens, like it kind of like set up all the right uh checks for me to become where I am politically and
Yeah.
ethically, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Star Wars is always a very interesting conversation. Especially because it's like it's so fantastical and like for kids and everything. But then when you like really dig deeper into the message, it's like and you really look at like how the world is, and it's like, oh, okay, like you start picking up on things that you might not when you were younger.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you do pick up on it when you're younger, but I don't think you realize it
Yeah,
until
you don't
later,
realize it for
you
sure.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people might not realize like you actually might be part of the empire, not like the actual world.
Yeah. 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 So, yeah. Some of those were, yeah. Right. All right.
So who are some of your like favorite films and I guess directors outside of like Star Wars that like really kind of shaped your identity as a
Yeah.
filmmaker?
I mean, it changes all the time. It really does.
Mhm.
I recently have been watching a lot of Michael Mann. There's this great movie, Thief, that I've watched like now 3 times this year with James Caan. Um, I I can kind of appreciate everything. I was on set yesterday, and we were talking about our favorite movies with crew members, and I was like, yeah, no, I try and find an entertainment and everything, but my favorite guys and girls that look direct movies, like Catherine Bigelow, Point Break rules, like Zero Dark 30 rules.
Yeah.
Like I know
Yeah.
that they're like those sort of movies, and like you can have critiques on them, but like I'm entertained the entire time. And then I mentioned Herzog already, but like Lessons of Darkness, which is this documentary about the aftermath of the Gulf War in Kuwait, was like our North Star for Lennon Copper. and we're so far from it, but because it's like again, it's borderline experimental. But I love the way that he does his interviews. I love the way that he shoots his subjects and the questions he asks. And I think that he lets people be who as comfortable and as much as who they are on screen. And that's really important when you're making a documentary. And then, like I like uh Fincher comes out with bangers every now and then.
Yeah.
Um I can't everybody. I really can't say enough. Oh, The Substance this year was awesome. The
Yeah.
Substance was one I watched that movie twice. Like that's one of my favorite movies now. And last year Zone of Interest also. So I'm like kind of always in like this like dark world of like darker sort of like I hate saying the word gritty, but like gritty movies where like people are smoking cigarettes all the time and like have like involvement in some criminal underbelly.
Almost seems like kind of like maybe a little bit of social critiques in like a lot of those films too.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I'm always going to gravitate towards a movie that's like, oh, this is actually, some like cool like heist, but actually the real message of the film is talking about, some political commentary of America or the world or something. That's always going to get me.
Okay. So I guess like some of your favorite like I guess since you are doing like documentaries, I'm sure you've like watched a lot of documentaries in your own time. Like obviously like in America, there's I guess like Ken Burns, Michael Moore, stuff like that. Like who are some like obviously you mentioned like Werner Herzog. What were some like the
Yeah.
other documentaries that kind of like really
Dude, Alex Gibney has and Jigsaw, I have made hit after hit after hit. Crime of the Century, which is about the opioid crisis. I think
yeah, that's right.
everyone should watch that movie.
Yeah.
Watch that movie. That's awesome. I didn't realize this, but like I felt there were a lot of similarities between Harlan County about the West Virginia coal miners in the 70s and what happened in Flint during the civil rights era, or I guess maybe the 60s civil rights era. So that's a great doc. I mean, that movie is so good. It's just remarkable that is only like 50 years ago or something. Camera Person, which is like an overall like collection of B-roll from different documentaries that I'm blanking on the director's name. Her name is Kristen something. That doc I think is amazing. And then everything that Laura Poitras does, like it's so good. I really like documentaries that are going to teach you something and like be almost hitting you over the head with information. So at the end of it, you're like, I gotta watch this again, really chase after.
Dropped out there for a second.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Right again.
Yeah.
I think we got
You
most
want me
of
to
that
go
done.
back?
Yeah, you can go back maybe like the last couple things you said.
Yeah, sure. I really like any doc that like is able to like emotionally convey or like is able to convey a lot of information that stirs emotion, whether it be anger or sorrow or anxiety. Those sort of documentaries I think are kind of truer to the sense of what I want my documentaries and what I want out of documentaries that I watch.
Yeah, I definitely love docs that like I see, and I know it's like a great doc when I'm like, I need to go research this. Like, I need to go personally go like look into this myself and like get more information. Like, it like kind of drives that urge and curiosity to like figure out something that maybe you not have known or like been fully aware of, and then it's like, okay, I need to see more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like any doc that's like, oh my God, there's so much research put into this. The Ken Burns Vietnam War series I think it
That's
was
a
like
classic. Yeah.
18 hours long, and I think I've
Yeah.
watched it like twice.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen the full thing, but I definitely seen like a lot of it. 18 hours is definitely
Yeah, it's good.
that's. But he put it in. I mean, he's very much known for like obviously his very in depth research and like how deep he
Yeah.
goes into topics, and I think that's also why people like why he's so big and like why people gravitate towards him so much that he gives it all to you.
Yeah, and I think that like uh the docs that I'm seeing that Jigsaw and Gibney are doing kind of do the same thing, and um I like how they keep the pacing up, right? Like they'll be like, here's all this information, here's all this stuff to be enraged about, and we're gonna give you like 90 seconds to 3 minutes of verite, like emotional story, and then we're going to go back into it. And so you like kind of earn like all of these reactions, and your mind is like, like what is the gaps in between this,
Yeah.
and so I think I look at them, and I look at Poitras and Huron County as I was editing Letting Copper, to be like, okay, here are my heroes. how do I how did they do it? What's the stuff that I have that I can do that can kind of like emulate it in some sort of
Mhm.
way?
Okay, and I guess like documentaries seem to be like also having kind of like a resurgence these days, especially because of like obviously streamers and YouTube and everything that's like kind of making them more accessible to people, not to necessarily have like go to a theaters here or like really like go out and like search for it too much. It's like right there. And I definitely feel like it's something that's starting to like gain more importance and people are like starting to like kind of come back to and like actually like really like dive into more. Is that something you also notice like within I guess that genre of film and like what do you see like of its like importance of like the way it's kind of shaping opinions and things and conversations in today's society?
I completely agree. And I think that um I love hearing. It's funny because like 8 years ago when we started Letting Copper, I don't think that many, maybe it's just my peers have gotten older or whatever, but I think that more people are watching docs now, and I'm really happy about that. Um, I don't care which ones you watch as long as they are telling the truth, more or less.
Yeah.
But
There's always that question of how accurate some of them are always.
yeah, and I'm not gonna like drag anyone on the bus for that. We can figure that out pretty easily. But I like that people are watching more documentaries, and I think that what is like pushing that and driving that is actually you. In my experience, is YouTube.
Yeah.
There's like this joke that like, okay, what 30-minute long YouTube documentary am I going to watch to eat my meal in like 5 minutes? And like that's me too, right?
Yeah.
Like last night I watched something on um this like FBI drug raid thing that this channel that I love does. And I'm constantly and I watch these like 3 hour long dry Neolithic ancient civilization docs, and I'll pay attention for the entire thing. I might not I might have to go back and whatever, but a lot of people are watching that, and I think it's great that YouTube is able to provide that to a general audience. I hope that most of the stuff that I'm watching and most of the stuff that other people are watching is telling the truth. But that pushes the envelope for streamers, for distributors to want to pick up more documentaries. Amazon Prime has like a crazy amount of them,
Yeah.
and the fact that Netflix and Apple TV and HBO are still funding really big documentaries, expensive documentaries. I think that's awesome, because it takes longer to make a documentary
Yeah.
than it does to make a normal movie. I know it does. It just does. It takes longer, and it might not. Sometimes it can cost more, um, and sometimes it's more work, and it changes constantly. If you're telling a
Yeah.
story that's like evolving, it changes constantly.
Yeah, that is always an interesting kind of thing about documentaries versus like traditional films that, like you said, like it can take years to even get the story of what you're trying to get, and you have to follow people and like follow ups and like you said, things change so much over time. So I guess with Flint and Copper, what were some like the biggest, I don't know, changes or developments that might have happened during like your whole process of this? Because like how long did it in total did like kind of take you to put this all together?
So we shot our last interview, I think sometime in 2021, some during COVID. Um, and we had multiple cuts of the film. We started in 2016. I came back from Flint for Yahoo News, and the one thing that was upsetting me the most about the Flint water, not the one thing, but a thing that was upsetting me the most about the Flint water crisis was this emergency manager law where a non-elected official can take over a city. Like, it's unconstitutional. Sorry. Like, it's just anti-democratic. Like, and it's happening to a majority black city. Jesus Christ, like, what the hell's going on? So I came back and I pitched them on a bunch of new stories. Like, we should do this emergency manager law. Trump's probably going to win the election that year. Could be really important. And eventually I found some people who want to help support me and do my first trip. So about a month later, I went back and I redid all those interviews. And that was the beginning of the movie. 8 years later, it came out. It was done. It was a lot of going to Flint, coming back, living in Detroit for like a month and a half or whatever, and driving up every day and doing interviews. Took a long time. And what was changing through it was the scope. Initially I really wanted to just do, here is 3 or 4 people, and here is how they're living with the Flint water crisis. And we eventually expanded the scope to the more or less the entire country. And we talk, the people in Newark reached out to me over Instagram because they knew I was making a documentary about the Flint water crisis. And they're like, hey, can you come and talk to us about what you know from Flint? And I said, yeah, sure. And I wasn't going to include Newark in the documentary.
Yeah.
And then after like two or three weekends of going out there, I met Yvette Jordan, who I love dearly. And I was like, okay, I have to include Newark. It's a gray area of what it's different than Flint, but there's similarities. It's a larger city, but it's still been disinvested in, still struggling economically. And then COVID happened. And then I thought that because of COVID, one of the things is that people or general audiences had a better vocabulary for science and health terms, and like were learned a little bit, or were interested more in like their own public health. And so we continued to shoot during COVID, just doing like an interview outside with somebody or something, or an interview with the mayor of Newark. And so it shifted from this, very personal, small story to let's get all the facts straight. Let's get all the history right and science right. And let's tell people exactly how this can happen in your town or city.
Yeah, I guess that was like one surprising part of this, like what I went into thinking it was like mostly just going to be just Flint, like obviously that was the big one that everybody was talking about. That was the news talking about. That's like all we ever really knew in terms of like, oh, that's crazy that would happen in this city. You wouldn't even think that's like a nationwide kind of problem. And like, so when you kind of like started hearing about these other cities and stuff, kind of like, what was your reaction? Like, were you aware of like this more widespread issue before you started getting in, like digging into this more?
I wasn't, I was pretty naive to water quality before I started this documentary. And yeah, I learned a lot, like I didn't do that well in chemistry or science in high school. And I still don't consider myself a water expert, but I know how the water quality is downplayed, I guess,
Yeah.
or maybe upplayed or upsold, that it's like better than what we actually think it is. I don't really think that that's true. And so I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised by the level of corruption and the things that state and federal officials did, can do to skirt these loopholes and get away with saving a buck over saving a life.
Yeah. Yeah. The politics of everything was like obviously another very big kind of aspect of this. But I guess like before we dive too far into like, can you give us like an overview of just for people that might not know, just in general, what the Flint water crisis is and like the overall like crisis of this kind of documentary that it's covering?
Sure. So I'll try. How brief do you want me? I'll be pretty brief. The Flint water crisis started because Flint was experiencing high water rates, and the city and the state started building this pipeline from one of the Great Lakes to Flint so they wouldn't have to buy water from Detroit. While that was happening, the governor of the state came in, Rick Snyder, and appointed an emergency manager, which took over all the public officials' responsibilities in Flint. They decided to switch to the Flint River water and rush through getting the water treatment plant in Flint ready to spread water throughout the city so their water rates would go down. It usually takes a year and a half for a water plant to get ready. They did it in something like 3 months.
That's great.
Water plant officials said it wasn't going to be ready. They did it anyway. After weeks, basically, citizens in Flint experienced water issues, and then they found out that there was lead in the water. They found out that there was lead in the water because people were testing it. Virginia Tech came up and tested the water, and they found out that the corrosiveness of the water was like 16 times higher than what it was from Detroit. So because this is an old city that has already gone on hard financial times, has lost like 80,000 jobs in the 80s after GM left, the infrastructure wasn't updated in that time. And a lot of lead pipes that were put there by the builders in the early 20th century, mid 20th century were still there. Lead pipes are fine as long as you treat the water correctly. Flint wasn't doing either. They were saving money by not treating the water, and the corrosiveness of the water was chipping off the lead inside the pipes, coming out of your faucet and poisoning your children. And the governor said it was fine. The governor said that the water was okay. He even said he was going to drink Flint water for like 30 days.
Did he ever actually do that?
I mean, come on. Like, why would you do that? He did. Why would you say that? It's so tone deaf. It's so like, oh, you're experiencing water. Actually, I don't think it's that bad. I'm going to drink filtered water for 30 days. Anyway, he finally, after like 18 months, admitted that there was an issue because Dr. Monahan and Atisha showed that there was elevated blood levels in about 1,000 children in Flint. And then they declared a state of emergency, despite the fact that they had known, their governor's administration had known almost before they did the switch. Yeah, like before they did the switch, his people in his circle were saying, "Don't do this."
Yeah, like even you explain this is kind of like, wow, like this is insane. Like this is insane that this would happen in the wealthiest country in the world. It's supposed to be like this shiny beacon and all this, and like we can't even provide water to our citizens. But like watching this, and I watched it with somebody I showed them like Chernobyl for the first time. It was almost impossible not to kind of make connections between just the ineptitude and the almost mundane act of like the administration leading to like these disastrous effects and like people trying to shift the blame. And like it was very hard not to like see those kind of parallels. Like, do you ever like notice any parallels kind of between those two situations?
Damn, it's so funny you say that. I think we were finishing our edit when I was watching Chernobyl. That's so funny. I mean, Chernobyl to me is one of the best HBO series I've ever seen. Again, going back to what I like, that dread, that dark, that like social commentary stuff, that's hitting it out of the park for me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for me to say that working on this doc hasn't. I haven't seen relevance just increase
Mm,
like everywhere. People talk about Aaron Brockovich all the time. It's like the same thing, right?
yep.
Michigan. There's another place in Michigan that's dealing with another water problem right now. Except it's being poisoned by either 3M or Wolverine. I don't want to misspeak. I've totally forgot if it is. Um, it's just happening everywhere, or some form of it is more prevalent, and so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
I hate
definitely.
laughing at it, but I have to laugh at it because it keeps me not go insane.
I mean, it's kind of the same effect I had. I think a lot of people had like watching Chernobyl. It's like it's so much ineptitude and just like decisions that are baffling that you almost have to laugh, despite like how tragic it ultimately is, and
Yes.
like seeing it as like, especially I see the parallels because it's like it's the state, it's like the state's the government that's supposed to be,
Yes.
making these good decisions for everybody. But then it's like these people in these positions. And like you said, like they appointed a guy who has ultimate control, who just ignored everything, every warning, every aspect, everybody telling him don't do this, which again, that happened in Chernobyl. And it's like you watch those series and you think something like that can never happen in our country or have never happened to me. But then it does. And it's like it kind of brings everything like home.
Yeah. I want to talk about Chernobyl more. Chernobyl has the great scene in the first episode where I don't know his guy's name, but like the main guy with the mustache who's like, no,
Yeah.
there's no way that
Mhm.
everything's bad, and like someone like goes over to check the reactor and it just like has exploded, and
Yeah.
they come back throwing up, and he's like, no, you're fine. We're not evacuating. Like that to me is like it's scary, but it's scary that that could happen at that level, obviously. Um and then when it happens, and it's also like so apparent, right? Like
Yeah.
with Chernobyl, like it's an actual explosion, but with a water crisis, it can be invisible sometimes,
Yeah.
until your hair's falling out, or you're sick, or you're covered in rashes or something like
Or you
that.
hold up like a piss yellow bottle that came from your faucet.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then they're finally like, oh, yeah, there's a problem, like, almost a year later. And it's like, okay, well, we all knew there was a problem, why it takes so long and whatnot. I guess one other aspect of this is like, it's such a widespread problem, but you don't necessarily hear it that much in the public or like in kind of like mainstream media. Like you heard about with Flint for like those few months, whatever. And then it kind of just left the conversation. In your opinion, like, why do you think that is? Why do you not think like this conversation about our water quality and like our infrastructure is not much more of a topic of conversation?
I'm going to be very blunt. It's because it's happening to poor people and people of color.
Okay.
And the media is not. I'm not going to like critique the media. I think the media did, like, some of the media did a great job as covering Flint. Rachel Maddow did a great job of covering Flint. The Guardian, they did a good job, but there is a lot of other things that pull our attention away from suffering poor people, and um, it's tragic. It really is tragic. And if a good example is actually Newark. The town surround Bellevue, New Jersey, was able to replace their lead pipes and and get on their lead crisis because they had the same water quality, or they had the same water that Newark was getting. Uh, and Belleville, or was it Nutley? I'm sorry, it's confusing, but mostly white, richer city or town than Newark. So able to get on it really quick. Newark wasn't. I wonder why. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really like, I don't know another reason. And if someone can give me another reason, then great. But uh I think it's because mostly systemic racism, and I think it's because a lot of our country doesn't care about people who are poor.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems that way when all of the areas mostly affected happen to be like poor neighborhoods, poor cities,
Yeah,
poor.
There's Jackson, Mississippi is experiencing a water crisis for the past 2 years, and we don't cover it. I see an article every now and then, but like, they can't. They have I think they have worse water quality than Flint ever did.
That's crazy because Flint's water obviously was so bad that it like became national news. And
Yeah.
I guess another aspect is like, I guess one dangerous part about obviously, like I said, water quality is like it can go by for so long you might not know. It's also like this just broader topic and conversation of like our aging infrastructure and topics of that. Like these are just things that we take for granted in general, and like we just expect to work and just always be there and like be out of sight, out of mind. Do you see any of the other aspects of like, I guess, our infrastructure outside of water that would also be a problem for us that people don't really realize?
I mean, yeah. The easiest one is to say bridges and roads, right? Because they're falling. I think that water is the scariest one. I think that the water crisis. I think that the infrastructure that delivers water to our homes is the scariest one to be at risk. And air pollution there's no infrastructure for that, basically, right? If the air gets polluted, what do we do? There's guidelines on that. And I think that I would love for some administration, probably not this one, coming in to have some sort of infrastructure to deal with air pollution, because I think maybe 20 years from now we'll start to thinking about that more as there's more water fires and stuff, wildfires and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, water's the scariest one, man, because like you give that to your babies, you give that to your pets. The pets is the biggest. Pets scares the hell out of me. I mean, I have a dog and like he gets filtered water because they don't have the same immune system and blood-brain barrier as grown adults do, right? So they can get sick easier. And hundreds of pets died in Flint and probably Newark because they were getting contaminated water. That's awful. And that's just pets. That's not even talking about pregnant women, people who have autoimmune disease, children, your grandparents. It's hard to already trust the government. And when you put a water crisis on top of that, it's no surprise that the public's trust for the government erodes even further.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's like a basic essential need that if you can't, maintain this, how can we trust you to maintain, other issues, like
Exactly.
you need water. You need water. Everybody needs water in their life. And that's
it's a human right.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get any pushback, I guess, when you were making this film? And like, obviously you had to like be critical of certain people in positions and like, obviously authority figures and government. Like, did you get a lot of like any pushback while you were making this or like after its release?
Yeah. So we reached out to everyone who sat on the Congressional Oversight Committee on both sides of the aisle. And no Republicans wanted to speak with us. Not really a surprise. Jason Chaffetz, who was like the Republican head of the committee, kicked me out of his office. Not him personally, but a scary guy did. And then after the release, here's actually a good story. I'll come back to this. We had a interview set up, a subject set up. Talked to her a few times. I'm not going to name her, but she was going to help us corroborate a story or a rumor that someone had broken into the Flint City Hall. This is true story that happened. Someone broke in the Flint City Hall during the middle of the water crisis and broke into the Public Works office, and papers and everything was scattered everywhere. So we don't know where the lead pipes are, was kind of like adding to that. And a TV got stolen. She was going to corroborate a theory as to who did that. So that was interesting when she didn't want to talk to us anymore and she like dropped off the face of the earth. And I took her to dinner. I talked to her on the phone like 5 times and went to her house after, and she wasn't there. Spent 4 days looking for her, calling her, and then went back to New York. Never heard from her again. Um, so that was interesting. I have no reason, that's just like you can think about what happened as you want, but it was just I didn't think that would happen. And then after the movie came out, we showed it to the Newark City administration, and they were a little upset, but they kind of complimented us at the end. They were like, "Oh, we didn't expect it to be kind of like dragging us so much, but I am happy that you included this part that said that what Mayor Baraka says at the end about how it's difficult for his cities like Newark to get the federal aid. And I agree with that. It is difficult for cities like Newark to receive federal aid, and goes back to my point before. Like, why do I think so? Because it's a poor Black city.
Mhm.
Generalizing, it's not, right? But like,
Yeah,
that's how people look at it.
that's how you look at it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess documentaries also like there are a lot, especially now in this day and age, they're like a big part of like conversation starters amongst the public and like raising awareness for the public and people that might not have really known the full extent of everything. Like I knew about this, but I didn't know like the full extent until I watched this. And like same person who's watching me like didn't even know about this at all. Then it's like, oh, it's like very eye opening. So like, what were some of the conversations that you heard after like people saw this? Like, was there any like kind of follow up? People were trying to reach out to you. Like, kind of what was the response after this kind of got a more wide release?
I am really happy about the response of where people have been reaching out to me because, and I'll bring it back to what I said earlier. I'm an angry person. Like, things that make me angry motivate me, right? And everyone who has seen it, who has reached out to me, has either texted me, emailed me, Instagram DM me. I love when that happens, when someone, a stranger who I don't know, reaches out. They're like, "This made me so angry and so sad." I think good because I am so angry and so sad about this, and that pushes the needle for me, right? I don't care where you are politically, but if you know more about how the government can lie to you and poison you, and you are angry about that, and you tell somebody else, or you do something about it, great if you do something about it. But if you tell somebody else, hey, you should watch Letting Copper, like, that's important, because the more and more we know about what the government is capable of, the more we are able to hold them accountable and
Yeah.
demand what we actually need, which, unfortunately, it's something as simple as clean and healthy water.
Yeah. I think that is the role of most documentaries, especially ones that cover topics like this. That is what they should be. They are to inform the public. They are to like create conversations and open minds and thoughts about like deeper issues and think about things that you might not be on your, periphery or your view. So when you're like making something like this, obviously this touching, this like sensitive, and like, how do you kind of maintain, I guess, a positive outlook, optimism, or do you?
Dude, I think about Flint every day. I think about Newark every day. I still do. It doesn't feel like the documentary is over. It won't, I don't think, for a very long time, if ever. Um, because I don't think that the people in either city, or people who are experiencing or have experienced water crises like this, are really receiving the justice that they deserve. So I think about it every day. I take a lot of breaks, though. I couldn't work on this every day, because I couldn't afford to. Like, it's impossible for me to, especially during COVID, it was impossible for me to edit this every day. And my producer and friend Alex Olson, who was lucky enough to have work, he was like, "How much do you need to live?" And I said, "If you pay me like $300 a week, I think I can skate by." He's like, "Okay, great. I'll pay you $300 a week for like 3 months. And then like, you pay me back when you can." Right. And so I have to pick up all these jobs here and there that would pull me away from the project, and not put it on the back burner, but put it like in an idling mode, where I would have to or I couldn't edit it every day, or I couldn't shoot it every day. And then there are other jobs where it would be like the middle of the job. It'd be like, okay, great, I got an interview with Raz Baraka. Cool, I'm going to do that in the morning, and then I'm going to go hang out with J Lo for the rest of the day to help her on her documentary. Like it really was that. Some of like our actual clip names are like from previous projects that I was working on 12 hours previously. So I was working on this while trying to support myself as a freelancer. And inadvertently, like the Doobie Brothers and Jennifer Lopez are executive producers on this because it's almost entirely self-funded. Which is crazy. I don't know if she knows that. I mean, I would tell her about it, but uh I don't know if everyone knows that like most of your paychecks coming to me were going straight to
this,
a new hard drive or like a trip to Flint or something like that.
I mean, I did notice that you did do like music videos and docs and stuff, like obviously with J Lo for like the halftime, I believe that Super Bowl was at, and then obviously Doobie Brothers tour. I mean, that's got to be kind of like a hard shift, going from this very intense topic to
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's funny because it's like, I don't know, with all those jobs, I'm there to do the job, right? And like I'm not distracted by it, but I take like a mental health like 2 or 3 days before I would jump back into the edit, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That helps me reset because I do need to get off of the high of like, oh, cool, it was just on tour, yada yada yada, and then be like, okay, I'm gonna be like cutting stuff that's just gonna be upsetting me all day, over and over and over and over again. Not, so yeah, you just have to take breaks and go slow. And I wish that I was more patient when I started this project, but I definitely have learned the patience, and it's paid off. But it's important to like check in with your friends and talk to your friends. There is one point where I was going absolutely insane and very upset, but Pat and Alex, my producers, got me back on track and bought me a burrito and took me out to lunch and were like, "You got this, dude." And so that really helped. And that's all I really needed. But like, yeah.
It's a little pick you up every now and then.
Yeah.
So what was it like working with J Lo and the Doobie Brothers, and like kind of what was that experience?
The most recent one was tour was Doobie Brothers like 2 or 3 years ago. That was awesome. It was a long tour. They're all great. And at first I thought that, oh, cool, this is going to be dad rock. Like, I'm expecting a certain level. And then like the day 2 of rehearsals, when they like clicked in all together after like not playing for a while, I was like, yes, this rules. Like, this is so sick. And it was a lot of fun. It's a cool way to see the country and to travel around and meet people in the tour bus. And I would love to do that again. And J-Lo started the same way. My friend David, who I've actually edited his first documentary recently, David was working with Jen and said, "Do you want to go on tour?" And I said, "I don't know. Like, I'm not a Jennifer Lopez guy. I don't know if you can tell." But I was like, "Why are you asking me?" Because I didn't know why. And he was like, he said, "I think you can shut up and be in a room and like record really good verite and just like get there and like get the footage you need." And I was like, okay. So flew out to LA, did a week of rehearsals with her, and then hit the road. And that world is awesome. That's really cool. She was really nice to me, really caring and liked my footage. And every now and then we do another thing together, and it's always great to see her again. So being a part of like a superstar tour like that, there was like multiple pinch me moments, but at the same time, when my camera's in my hand, I'm like, okay, where's the good shot? Like I feel bulletproof almost. I'm like, where's the good shot? Okay, I got it. Find another one, tell the story, move on. And every now and then you take a deep breath and you're like, I'm with the Doobie Brothers. This is tight.
Yeah,
That's Michael
yeah,
McDonald's.
yeah. That's dope. It's definitely dope. So like documentary filmmaking, it's such a labor of love. Obviously, like this one took years and years to like finally get seen. Like, would you do it all again?
Yeah, if the project was right, I wouldn't pay for it myself, but I would absolutely do it again. I'm working on an idea that I would love people to reach out to me about if they want to talk about ancient civilizations and
Okay.
the progress of humankind. I'm working on an idea. I just went to Turkey for a spec trip about that. And I edited this documentary copyright infringement about this artist CJ Henry that was produced by Frank Spadafora and directed by my great friend David Sapshin. That's coming out soon. I'm happy to shoot them. I don't know. The right project would need to come along for me to say yes to directing one. And it probably will happen. There'll probably be another one where I'll say, oh, okay, like this is infuriating. Like, let's do it again. But let's not take 8 years. Let's do it now.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things these days to be, mad and upset about. That's for sure. There's definitely not a shortage of those things.
There's not a shortage, buddy. No, we've had an interesting week, like just the last 7 days have been
Yeah, we did.
documentary worthy. So
There,
I would love to work on something that's super relevant if anyone's listening.
I mean, 50 Cent, I think, already said he's like
I
working on
saw
a
that.
documentary.
I saw that.
A day
Dude,
ago. That's kind of crazy.
Mr. Jackson, please call me. Like, I want to talk to you so bad about that.
Yeah, that would be crazy. So I guess like, you've had all this experience now, filmmaking, directing, and cinematography, all these different aspects. Looking back, if you're talking to your younger self coming up, like what advice would you give them, like when they're getting to film and like when they do what you're doing now?
Uh, I would say slow down. Like slow down your mindset. It's not going to have like we thought Letting Copper was going to be done in 2 years. We thought Letting Copper was going to be done in 2 years, and when we passed 2 years, I was working with a photographer, and he was like, "You might be working on this for a while," and I was like, "No, it's just going to be one more year." So my biggest advice is slow down, and secondly, like you don't like your path towards whatever your career success is not the same as someone else's, and you're going to I constantly feel like, oh, if only I was like one of my friends, if only I was working on blah, 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 blah. But then I have I come down a little bit and I think, okay, I made a documentary. I'm very, very proud of that. I've done other cool projects. It's all perspective, and it's really tough to ground yourself, but it's important. And it's important to remember what you've already done. And as long as you're motivated and driven and you know how to problem solve, you know how to achieve your vision or create what you want to create, you're going to be fine. The money will come later. Money's not coming for me. I'm still going to be broke about Letting Copper for a little bit longer, but don't worry about that stuff. Just focus on what you want to make and what you think you're really good at. If you're really good at this thing, like keep going.
Yeah. So where can people watch Letting Copper?
Letting Copper is available to rent or purchase on Apple TV, YouTube, Amazon, Google, Vimeo, and on demand. It's on demand right now. And hopefully soon it will be on a streaming service, but it's an important film to watch right now. So with the, upcoming change in administration, and it's an important film to know to make sure that you have safe and healthy water.
We'll have all those links down below. I completely agree. This is definitely a very important conversation and topic and discussion that people need to watch and like kind of have like a knowledge base of and like have in their wheelhouse to understand how these things are also very likely affecting you and like where you live. Like this is an ongoing thing for us. And like I think you did a very, very good job of like covering this and like providing information and like painting this picture for people that they can like take and like kind of point back to whenever these kind of topics come up.
Thanks, man. That really means the world. That's really kind words. Thank you so much for having me. And this has been amazing conversation.
Yeah,
Really,
man,
really.
it was great talking to you. Great having you on. And like, we'll have you on whenever you want to talk film, talk chop. Any project you got coming up, we're always available and open.
Hell yeah. Sounds good, dude.